Let me start by going quickly through the history of American government attitudes towards the use of nuclear weapons as they affect the Korean Peninsula, because I think a lot of the things that we hear about that are scary are the residue, the vestiges of the policy that was adopted in the Eisenhower administration. You remember during the Truman administration, President Truman suggested once that perhaps he would use nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula. And there was a very strong outrage in the Congress of the United States, in the American public, and in England. And so the Prime Minister of England had to promise to fly to the United States, get a commitment from Truman that he would not use nuclear weapons during the Korean War. And I think that was an honest commitment. I think, in fact, the statement that Truman made that was suggesting that he might use nuclear weapons was a misunderstanding of what he was intending to say. Truman, in fact, I think, of all of our presidents, had the most profound understanding, of course, of the consequences of using nuclear weapons and was determined not to use them again. Eisenhower had a very different view. His view was that we had to use nuclear weapons, that we were outmanned by the Russians and the Chinese, and that the only way the United States could meet its security commitments was to threaten and plan to use nuclear weapons. So that nuclear weapons were put everywhere in the world where it was possible to do so. Unless the government of the host country strenuously and seriously objected, we put nuclear weapons everywhere that we could. And that included, of course, the Korean Peninsula. We then had war plans which assumed that nuclear weapons would be used in any conflict, and the military were not equipped for any serious extended conventional conflict operation. And I saw that in a study I did of the Quemoy-Matsu crisis of 1958, in which the U.S. government was operating on the assumption that if there was a war, the only way we could defend against the Chinese invasion was by the use of nuclear weapons. The Kennedy administration totally changed that. It moved from a posture in which nuclear weapons would be used if a war went on more than a few days to a posture in which it would try not to use nuclear weapons and would only use nuclear weapons if it was necessary to prevent defeat, without anybody having a clear notion then of how you would actually use the nuclear weapons. There was change in the immediate equipment of forces, so that all American forces are equipped now so that they can engage in sustained conventional combat. And that was true on the Korean Peninsula as well as every place else. But there was a not change in the deployment. So you continued to have a substantial number of nuclear weapons in a number of different places, including on the Korean Peninsula, simply because nobody had removed them. I actually tried with a colleague named Ivan Selin when we were in the Johnson Defense Department to do a study of whether we could remove all our nuclear weapons from all of Asia. And we were about to conclude that we could and asked the Secretary of Defense to withdraw them when the Joint Chiefs threatened to go to the President if we did that. And so Paul Nitze, who was the Deputy Secretary, said Johnson would not be in the mood for a fight with the Chiefs and we could not do it. But there was no need for the nuclear weapons that remained on the Korean Peninsula. They were there simply because they had previously been there, and the Johnson administration civilians were not willing to have a fight with the military to take them out. And it was only, of course, in the Bush administration which much Republican administrations are much less concerned about the attitude of the Joint Chiefs, and then the weapons were taken out. Since then, I think there's come to be a clear understanding that there is no utility for the use of nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula, or indeed any place else, as a matter of first use or even of second use. And the United States government, it is my understanding, has informed the Korean government that in response to a North Korean use of nuclear weapons, it would not necessarily respond with nuclear weapons. And I believe that it would not respond with nuclear weapons, that it would use its overwhelming, sustained conventional capability to end the war as quickly as possible with as few nuclear weapons used as possible. No number of nuclear weapons used on the Korean Peninsula will permit the peninsula to survive in anything like its current status. And we need to do everything we can to reduce that possibility, including by making it clear that we will not initiate the use of nuclear weapons. Thank you.